Hello, everyone. I'm Chloe. Thanks for tuning in today. This is a special segment I like to call Chloe's Thoughts, where I basically riff about something that's been on my mind lately. And this could be about anything, really. It could be about politics, art, philosophy, religion, mindfulness. And I plan on doing these regularly. This will all be part of the Heart Speaks podcast. So let's dive right in. So lately I've been thinking about the focus in diversity, equity, and inclusion spaces on equity. Now, what is equity? Equity is wealth. It's material ownership of goods, and many see it as a form of reparations for slavery and systemic institutional racism. But while equity may sound like a fine idea, I'm thinking it might actually be a product of what German philosopher Erich Fromm called the having mode. And how do I explain this? This is a mode in which a human being says, I have, therefore I am, right? The having mode would be like if my entire sense of self was defined by what I have, by what I possess. It's consumerist in nature. And if my identity is defined by what I possess, my goal will be to keep growing the number of things I possess, that I have, which of course will never satisfy me. Now, this take might actually be slightly unfair, right? Because reparations could be seen not only for its material substance, but also for what it represents symbolically. A nation owning up to its dark history of dehumanizing and enslaving people because of their skin color. A nation atoning for its sins and giving something up, not as an empty gesture, but as a measure of its penitence and regretfulness. A nation showing its understanding that by wronging its citizens, it wrongs itself. And so by giving reparations, it's actually repairing itself. But this would be a different kind of reparations. And the conversation around it would be about something deeper than material equity for its own sake. The Jungian author Helen Luke talks about this distinction in her work when she talks about money. She points out that the word money comes from the Latin word moneta, which was named after a Roman goddess in whose temple Roman coin was made. Luke points out that the deity, this goddess, represented the, quote, free spirit of exchange and symbolized relatedness. And without an understanding of this relatedness, people would start to worship money for its own sake, not for what it actually was supposed to point to, a free spirit of exchange and relatedness between human beings. So I think that a discussion about reparations rooted in that approach would be far more profound because it would be about relationships, the relationship between a nation and its citizens, the relationship between citizen and citizen, how to repair relationships when people have been wounded by a legacy that has not fully been grappled with, and how we can rectify a history of slavery by entering into a tradition and a practice of free exchange, which in a way is the opposite of slavery, not only literally, but also spiritually. Now, this is not the having mode like I described earlier. It's something else. Erich Fromm called this the being mode. The being mode is when my identity is defined by how I choose to be in the world, how I choose to show up and respond, how I choose to relate. The being mode is defined by relationships. And I bet that if our national conversations about reparations were rooted in the being mode, it would be a totally different conversation with a totally different tone and cadence. Because the central question would not be, how much should a person who is a descendant of slavery have, but what kind of nation should we all aspire to become? How should we treat each other in this nation? How can we actively make the choice to be in deep relationship with each other? Now, there's nothing wrong with having things. As human beings, we have to have things like shelter and security. We need to have and consume food and water. But this doesn't solve the problem of racial supremacy. Supremacist ways of thinking are a kind of overcompensation for a lack of wholeness or sufficiency. I become a supremacist when I start to see another human being as less than me so that I can feel good about myself. I become a supremacist when I overcompensate for my own insecurities by projecting them onto others. Solving supremacy, then, is not about the having mode at all. So the deep focus on equity as such is a misapprehension of the problem, because the problem is relational. So any project that focuses on equity or reparations can only be sustainable and only result in the existential transformation of human beings if it begins by asking not which racial groups have what, but by asking how we ought to be in relationship to each other and how we ought to treat one another fundamentally. So if you enjoyed this little musing, please be sure to let me know. Let me know what you think. You can also support this work by becoming a member of the website, subscribing to my YouTube channel, or following me on social media. I'll see you wherever our paths cross. Ciao.